recording. Okay. So good morning. Mary Ellen Dombrowski, President of the Connecticut River Valley Chamber. This is the first of 4 open meetings we're going to have for various sectors of our membership that are going to be opening up soon, hopefully, or if it's not immediately, it's going to be very soon. We're very happy to have Jill Berry with us here. She's one of our representatives from Glastonbury. We've invited other representatives and town leaders because they're interested in feedback from the businesses. Most of you will have common issues. I think most of we're gyms and a hair salon this morning, but we have other folks coming in. So thank you for being here. We just want an open conversation so that we can all open quickly, safely, and protect our customers and our staff. So Paul Haas will be facilitating us today. He's chairman of the board of the chamber. And here we go. Welcome.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to see everyone here. I'm Paul Haas. I'm with the Haas Agency in Glastonbury. Why don't we just go around the room here. I'll call out people's names and you just introduce yourself, the business and the town that you're in. Tina?
Hi, I'm Tina Lorenzen. I'm with the Chamber of Commerce.
Mike Ski?
I have now changed to Mike Ski from Here Today Salon in Glastonbury, and I'm also the networking officer and marketing officer for the chamber.
Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Carter. I'm the new general manager for the Pure Bar West Hartford studio. Today is my 3rd day on the job.
Oh.
Hi, Liz?
Hi, I'm the owner of Pure Bar so I actually have 9 locations. Glastonbury was my 9th. So I invited my whole team here.
Great. Jill?
I am Jill Berry, and I am the state representative for Glastonbury.
Thanks. Barbara?
Hi, I'm Barbara Traverso, the general manager of Glastonbury Pure Bar, and I just want to give a shout out to Joyce. Hi, Joyce. I haven't seen you in such a long time.
Girl, we all come back to GB, don't we?
Joyce?
Yes, we do.
Introduce yourself, Joyce.
Yeah, I'm Joyce Hyde. I am with Empowered Indoor Cycling and Strength in Glastonbury.
And Marlboro Pilates, I don't have a name other than that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's how it came up. I'm Mary Beth Lawrence, and I own Marlboro Pilates in Marlboro.
Rebecca?
Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone.
I'm Rebecca, and I work for Liz Roberts, Pure Bar, Glastonbury, and West Hartford as well.
Kelly?
Same. I'm Kelly. I work with all 9 of Liz's Pure Bars, so Glastonbury and West Hartford as well.
Sure. Hi, Eileen. Could you introduce yourself?
Yep, Eileen Buckeye, Development Director, East Hartford.
Thank you. Mike.
I'm Michael Daniels, Economic Development Coordinator for the town of East Hartford.
Wonderful. Rachel. You're muted, Rachel.
I just unmuted you.
Yeah. I'm Rachel Donovan, and I have a solo counseling and body work practice. So a lot of energy work and various mind-body modalities. So not quite what everybody else, but I figured it'd be a great conversation to be in on.
Great, thank you. Travis. Oh, he's a marketing manager from the chamber, and he's not talking. And then I have Jocelyn at the bottom here.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn De Maio. I own Empowered Indoor Cycling and Strength Studio.
Wonderful, thanks.
Hi, Jocelyn.
Hi.
I'm going to be the facilitator today. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to have a volunteer, and anyone can volunteer if they have an issue, particular issue they're facing. The participants will be able to ask a few questions of that business owner so that we get an idea of a clarification of what their problems are, what the issues are that they're facing. And then each participant will be able to offer one suggestion, and if we have more time, we'll go around the room again. But offer one suggestion as to what they think that business owner could do to improve the situation or solve the problem. as the enforcer of the rules, I'm going to try to keep everybody on track. So if you're making a statement, instead of asking a question, I'm going to stop you so that we keep to the goals that we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to get as many ideas on the table. And because these are like industries, many of the ideas will be applicable to all of the people. So the industry volunteer will give some idea, will explain their situation for maybe 2 to 3 minutes. We'll have about 10 minutes for questions, and then maybe 7 or 8 minutes to go around the room and offer suggestions. No questions are dumb and no suggestions are dumb. You never know what's going to happen when you have an idea. Some of the craziest things I've ever tried worked. So that's what we would like to have happen here. So I'll start. Is anyone?
So, Paul, before you start, I just want to welcome Jeff Curry in. He may want to just say hello.
Sure, Jeff, go ahead.
Hey everybody, Jeff Curry here, state rep out of East Hartford as well as Manchester and South Windsor. I do have another Zoom conference call at 11, so I have limited time just in case it happens to go over, but just wanted to pop in and just kind of be part of the conversation. Thanks for doing this, Mary Ellen, in the chamber.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. I didn't see you jump in there.
See a few others that joined as well, I think.
Rebecca? Just introduce yourself, Rebecca, if you could.
I have already. My name's Rebecca and I work for Pure Bar from Glastonbury and West Hartford.
All right.
I think we're good.
Okay, we're good. Who would like to volunteer to offer their first an issue to the group?
I'll go. Could you maybe first clarify? I know there's a lot of gyms here. Can you clarify how you see the regulations for us to open? I want to make sure that I'm understanding it appropriately.
Okay, so your question is, and what don't you understand about it, or what?
Well, so yeah, the way I read it was the 5-person rule. Is that is accurate for gyms as well? That you know, restaurants are outside, but hair salons can have 5 people, and so I was assuming that we also were on the 5-person per allowed in the studio at a time.
If I could, am I allowed to say something now? Sorry, I don't understand the rules. My understanding is that as Pilates studios, bars, cycling studios, gyms, we're not actually allowed to open yet. So we don't have any regulations or rules given to us because we are not yet allowed to open. So we're still closed. So one of the things that I would like to bring up is how can we get to open sooner than whatever the current plan is?
And if it's, so I also thought that I was assuming we'd be under the 5-person rule. So when we do get the go ahead, we're with 5 people.
We don't have, they haven't given us anything yet, so we don't really know. Mike's trying to say something.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I think, because I've dealt with this already. So we do have guidelines for hair salons and barbershops. And I think there's some confusion, and Jill could comment on this. At the very top summary, the state just re-summarizes their statewide, call it guidelines, independent of any of us opening, are that we shouldn't be having social gatherings of more than 5. And I think that that's confusing everybody to think that's the requirement for a hair salon, a gym. We don't have a guideline that says there's a limit of 5. For salons and barbershops, it's 50% of your capacity, with all the other guidelines around social distancing, 6 feet. There's many pages of guidelines. They're really not guidelines, they're rules and protocols. But way up on the top, it just re-summarizes the state intent to not have social gatherings of more than 5. Maybe Jill can clarify if I'm wrong on that.
Sure, I'll jump in. I think that's more of a reminder that even with the reopen date of May 20th, like, we're not out of the clear and the virus is still there, and we still, as people have to abide by all the rules. So there still are no large gatherings. There's still, you still have to do all the safety precautions. May 20th isn't a magic date where it's just all going to go away. So I think it's just a reminder to people that even with things opening, that we as citizens and patrons and consumers have to remember the safety guidelines to keep this virus contained.
If I just make another introduction, I saw Senator Saad Anwar got online, and I just want to thank him for being here. I know you probably all know he's a medical doctor and has been serving our communities above and beyond. Senator, we're so grateful for you being here, but all that you're doing in serving our community through this horrible time.
Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. And I'm actually watching and listening to all that's been going on. And I know that there are a couple of professions who are very hesitant and scared and concerned about the May 20th date. One of them, of course, is your network and your group that we have today, but also the dental hygienists. And look, I've been pretty open about my perspective about the timing and my concern and the lack of enough PPEs at the businesses at this point, and also not having enough data to actually make intelligent decisions. And the downside of the risk is on the higher side. So that's why I've been hesitant. So the principles are appropriate, but we don't have the number of tests that we need, and we don't have the screening levels that we need. And that's part of my concern. We are getting closer to the right date, or May 20th is that date. And I have been fairly open about this, and then I can speak to anybody about that if it's needed.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
So my question and my thought, which I think applies to the businesses that we're discussing here, if social distancing of 6 feet or more and wearing protective masks is what we're told is helping, that's what prevents mostly from being spread. If our businesses can do that and can show that we can do that, shouldn't we be allowed to open with those parameters in place? And of course, whatever other guidelines are given to us, even, you're saying certain data we don't have yet, but if we have the data that says, if we stay our distance apart and people are wearing their mask, especially all the employees and the staff, if that works, then why can't we open our businesses with those things in place, is my question. As a small studio owner, there's gonna, a lot fewer people are gonna walk through my doors and are gonna go into the mall, for example. So that's my question.
Sure. Again,
whoever wants to answer.
I was just going to add to that. This is Jocelyn De Maio. I would also say that, that a small boutique studio is not the same as a large scale gym, right? I mean, we have a smaller space, but we also have people touching less equipment. Specifically in my world, I'll talk about my cycling studio. You walk in and you go to one bike, you touch one bike, and you leave. Right? It's not a case of people are walking around, picking up a weight, then they're going over here, picking up a band, and they're going over here, picking up another weight, going on the treadmill, now the elliptical. They're doing one thing. Mm-hmm. And same thing with a bar class. You're going to one spot, touching one thing, right? So I guess that is sort of the question I have is there opportunity to categorize the smaller boutique fitness centers different than the big box gyms, because we do and I'm sorry, Marlboro Pilates, I forgot your name. We do have, Mary Beth, we do have the ability to do that versus other places that might not.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Do you mind if I try to see how I look at this? So if both Mary Beth and Jocelyn, you make valid points. The parts of the issue that we don't know is that depending on your location, is the incidence of asymptomatic patients who are carrying this is about 25% or 1%? We don't. And if it's 25%, changes the game. When you're hyperventilating and you're exercising, you are actually blowing the virus in the air. Yes, we are reducing the risk by putting a mask on the person who is exercising or who is in your facility, and the one who is actually close to them. You're reducing that risk, but you're not eliminating it.
Mm-hmm.
In the absence of incidence rates, the prevalence of the disease, we are basically taking a little bit of risk. And all I'm saying is, if we have that data, and that data should be done, this should be a priority, so we can look, why do we drive at a certain speed limit? That is because we have data to tell us that the number of accidents decrease. And those studies have been available, and we made those policies. Right now, we are making a policy in the dark, and the downside is that we are willing to say that X number of people, it's okay for them to die. And I have a problem with that as a human, and that's my challenge. And I'm saying, look, open, but get us more data so we actually have a risk analysis which is more robust than an emotional feeling. That's the whole point. And then the hair dryer and some of those things.
Sorry.
Can I ask you a question of the gym owners? And that is it possible, and in some cases I'm sure it's not, but is it possible in the case of Pilates to do that outside? And does it make any difference if it's outside?
Well,
no,
you could do a few things outside, but with Pilates, and we have been able to offer some online classes with people working in their homes, so there has been that. So outside would be sort of a similar situation as being at home, because with Pilates, we do have some specialized equipment that people work on. At least 50% of my business is one-on-one, me and one client in the studio. That is it. So the risk there is low. So to be able to be outside, you can't bring the equipment outside. Yes, there are some things you could do outside, and that's an option, and similar to doing the online classes that we're doing now. But I just, yeah, so, one-on-one, and where is the data coming from that we're going to be using to make this determination?
I'd like to just kind of answer that question also. So we can do our workout outside. Also, it's, it's a modification of what we would do in the studio because we wouldn't have it. But so I was then caught up on where would we do this? Because the parks are closed. Where would we legally be able to host a class outside? And is that considered a social gathering if we have more than 5 people? So could we host a class? It's got to be economical, right? We're also trying not to go under all of our businesses. So how could we host it with more people so that we can provide value for these people to come meet us somewhere? So it's the logistics of where we could do it, and could we do more than 5 outside?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can I share another thought? Again, the principles are that if a person touches something, in the absence of data, if anybody touches any material, you work with the assumption that the virus is on that stuff. And if you have a cleaning mechanism obsessively after that, that's a good thing. If there's another understanding that anybody, in the absence of data, anybody walking into the place is actually spreading the virus. And if you have a protection around that, it's well documented, and you're following it, and you're able to communicate that, that's great. And if you have all of those principles in place, then you are in far better shape than overwhelming majority of the people are right now. And then by that example, you're okay to start open. I think that's the part of the governor's plan is not mandating that everybody open. It is actually suggesting that people open. So which is a good thing, because if you're not ready, then you don't have to open. That's how I see that.
But you're not allowed to open, sir. That's the problem. So if I have myself and one client in my studio, and yes, we obsessively wash afterwards in protective gear, but I am not allowed to open. My understanding is I am not legally allowed to open right now, although I feel it's very safe, and I feel it's safer than some of the situations that are opening and I understand that no one has to open, and I think that's what's fantastic, but unless I'm misunderstanding the guidelines, most of us here in the fitness we're not allowed to open. So we're kind of left feeling frustrated because we have the safety mechanisms in place. We have the two people in a space, or 3, but we're not allowed to open. So am I misunderstanding? And
You're talking about the May 20th? Or you're talking about right now?
Well, I'm talking about May 20th or any date, because as far as I know, when I've been watching the governor's daily updates and reading, when people ask about a gym, which we're not, that's part of the problem. These small boutique fitness centers are not gyms. It's sort of tossed aside, like, forget it. Don't even talk to me about a gym. That's not happening until the very end. Well, what is the very end? Is that July, August, September? And so we don't know when we're opening. Our understanding is now we're not allowed to, but we also have no date. So am I misunderstanding that?
Well, I will have to do a little bit of digging to understand the difference between a fitness center versus a gym, because I think they're lumped together right now. That's my understanding.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
the whole problem. Here that's why a lot of us are here, because we want to show that there are differences. So, we would like to be seen differently so that maybe we can get more people out and about moving safely. I mean, I hear of people who are like, oh, I just had to go to the grocery store just to get out of the house. And that person might be at risk, and that's probably the last place they should go. So can we open up more places safely where people can go out and about safely, instead of having people only allowed to go to crowded situations, restaurants, grocery stores, malls, things like that, and let people get out and about safely and do things that will improve their immune system and their health, which exercising will do. So I'm sorry I spoke a little bit longer. I will stop so other people can say something.
No, and
Jill, go ahead. Jill,
yeah,
go
yeah, if I could just jump in. Just getting back to Jocelyn's original question, whether or not these small boutique gyms are separate from the big box gyms. I've had conversations with leadership, and they are considering you a different type of gym, and you're not the wows or the big, gyms. So I think that they will be evaluating that and looking at the smaller gyms from a different angle, and evaluating them different from the big box gyms. So, I mean, I don't have a timeline for when you will be able to reopen, but I think, like you said, and I know some of the smaller gyms or, fitness centers had sent me some guidelines that they would implement. And I did send them to the reopen committee so that they're looking at it from a different point of view, where there's not as much equipment, where you can wipe everything down. It's more like 1-on-1 or 1-to-4. So I think that they will be looking at that and making a decision on the smaller boutique gyms as opposed to the big box gyms. And I think when the governor speaks and he speaks about the gyms, it's the big wow gyms. It's not the little gyms.
Mike, go ahead.
Yes, I completely, that's awesome, Jill, because I know many of the great people that are on here have the smaller boutique gyms. I would suggest that all of you, just to get ahead of it, that you look at the guidelines for hair salons and barbershops, but because for a small boutique, I think it's very, very similar. In fact, we have similarities, right? We have individual chair rental, solo kind of salons that are really just one stylist, one employee in a four walls. There is nobody else there. And then there's bigger salons. I'm a medium-sized salon where we have 10 stylists and 4 receptionists, and we have to make changes. But if you look at the guidelines for hair salons, every element of it is applicable to a boutique gym. And I think the concern is that the larger gyms have stacked up, here's all the treadmills, there's people running on the treadmills and sweating and moving from one piece of equipment to the other. So that's probably why they just chose, okay, we're not there yet because we have to figure that all out. So my recommendation is get into the hair salon guidelines and dig in and understand every aspect of it. And there's a lot there. And there's a lot of work to do as an owner or manager, and just jump in and get ahead of it. Training programs, checklists, logs, then you won't be starting up. If you have to wait a month for the guidelines, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's 2 months, you're already done and you're ready to go if you can do that. That's my recommendation.
Jill, so I have a, like, we have a plan and we're, you know, like we're taping out studios. I installed UV lights into the HVAC system. I don't know if you've heard of these. They kill, you know, they've shown to kill viruses. We haven't tested, obviously it kills corona, but like we're putting all the steps in. I'll certainly take Mike's advice because that's great advice, but is this something that I can also submit to you, like show you what we're doing at our Connecticut studios?
Yes, if you send me an email, I will pass it along to
Can
the
you give me your
Reopen
email?
Committee and to the governor's office.
Yeah, could you?
Oh, go ahead.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Perfect, thanks.
Is there any type of certification that can be given to businesses from an outside vendor or whatever it may be, saying that, yes, this facility has been cleaned, it's been fixed? And
it's in the guidelines. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
It's in the guidelines.
Oh,
there's a certification that the owner needs to complete for re-employ Connecticut. I forget what the name of it is.
Okay.
We have to complete that before we're allowed to open.
Okay.
Can I ask?
That's why I say again.
Joyce, go ahead.
Yeah. The last I read online is that gyms, now again, whether we can open earlier, they were talking second wave in June. That was what was out there. So given that we likely aren't going to be opening on some capacity May 20th, and even if we do open, it's going to be on some limited capacity, whether it's 50%, whether it's 5 people, whatever. What is the talk about getting some support? Because it's going to be a long time until we can open 100%. And all of us as small business owners operate at very tight margins and still have to pay rent and still have these other non-changing operational costs. So what is the talk to help keep us going during these months where we have to be at limited capacity? I guess that's to the state reps.
I can take, again, I'm sure, I hope that everybody has requested for PPPs and they have received that. And if I've heard some people have not received it because their banks refused. And in that case, you go to another bank. So just please remember, you can go to any and every bank that you will want to, or any other lending agency to be able to work for that. The other
PPP only applied though based on payroll for 2019. So in my case, I doubled in size and opened on March 2nd. My costs, my operational costs more than doubled. So when I applied for PPP and was granted PPP, it was based on payroll from 2019. So, and I know that there's another business on the call that's in the same boat.
Well, my fear is actually the longevity. So I got PPP, but we're going to be forced to open with such limited modified operations that we're not going to be able to make money. So my goal is just to at least break even during this phase 2, phase 3, whatever phase you want to call it, where we're, where we're limited and modified, because there's just, with half capacity or even less, like there's no way we can actually run a profitable business.
Well, again, the margins are very small and we're in the same boat, right? Plus, again, operational costs have more than doubled. And now add on to that the added cleaning, and on top of what we already are a very clean facility, right? But now the extra steps, the extra time between classes so we can allow the EPA product to dry properly, things like that. And, even Mike, from a hair salon perspective, I mean, you're not going to be running at the capacity that you were running at before. I really would like to understand, to Joyce's question, what state aid is there available for us? Because even opening is going to help somewhat, but it really won't, because now I'm paying instructors, I'm paying people that right now I'm not paying to be there, my receptionist, etc. My costs go up, and added cleaning. So what aid is there so that we can survive?
Jeff, I see that you've been in the chat room. Would you like to respond to some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as of now, if anybody's reading the chat, as of now, like everything that's being done as far as statewide is being done solely through the governor's power through executive orders. Unfortunately, the legislature has not been as involved, I think, as some of us would like to have been and be as throughout this entire process, whereas we're kind of more acting as advocates and kind of relaying a lot of these types of concerns down up to the administration so that they're kind of having more information to make decisions. So all of the financial pieces thus far have been solely at the discretion of our federal delegation and the work that Congress is currently doing through the PPPs, the various types of loans, the unemployment, the additional stimulus stuff there. So I know the question was posed as far as, is there anything beyond those 8 weeks now that the businesses aren't all part of phase one? So I'm just waiting for a response back from his chief of staff, Blumenthal's chief of staff, just to see if that conversation is happening at the federal level. The legislature itself adjourned in May. We had a constitutional deadline. Obviously, we hadn't been doing anything since March, but we're going to likely go back in this summer sometime for a special session to deal with budgetary issues and kind of reassess where things are at and what the feds are going to continue to offer, if there are additional stimulus packages coming, to be able to see if we're have the ability to plug any sort of the holes and address any kind of the issues that you folks are bringing up today. So unfortunately, it's not a great answer to say, I guess we are waiting to see, but that is kind of the answer that we have at the moment.
Can I ask a follow-up question? In addition, can you confirm that it's on your radar for people like us that have received PPP but can't open? So it's very hard for us to get our payroll up to that 75% unless we just, and I think the other part is some of my employees don't want to come off unemployment because they're making more on unemployment than they would if I even tried to bring them back to pay them to do nothing to meet the PPP guidelines.
Well, so I will say that, you know, if and when businesses reopen, if employees aren't going to return and a position has been opened and offered back to them, technically per current DOL guidelines, they would be putting their unemployment at risk and not necessarily be guaranteed continued unemployment. So anybody who thinks that they're just going to be able to say, no, I don't want to work, unless it's directly COVID related and they have a health issue or they're taking care of someone. But if they're just concerned for themselves, then there's still a question out there as to if those folks would even be eligible for continued unemployment. I don't know if that answered your question or.
Mike?
Yeah, I just want to add to that because that in itself is probably one of the biggest issues that we all face. Many of us have big hearts and care very much for our employees. I have employees that have worked for us for 35 years. And so I would not ever put an employee at risk of not having unemployment, especially understanding that their whole life situation and that this is a critical for them. At the same time, I have a PPP that has to be satisfied to a certain level to get forgiveness. So you want to talk about one of the biggest challenges we have, just like you hear some of the discussion here, people on all sides of it in terms of it's too early, we need to get going now. We have employees and we have clients with those same emotions and anxieties. That's probably the most difficult challenge there is navigating that. So I just, I don't want to glance over because that's a big issue. And Liz talks about already having approved PPP. I think the biggest issue with PPP is that it should give business owners that have received it already should have the ability to decide when the 8-week period starts, not have it forced on them that it starts the day they receive the money. And that's what's going to kill small businesses is not having that flexibility.
I think I did a Facebook Live with the commissioner, the deputy commissioner of DCD yesterday, and then it's on my Facebook as well. I'll share with you that your business and a number of other businesses are clearly impacted with the timing of the PPP and the fact that it becomes irrelevant if you're not open. And I think the federal bill will have to get modified and improved on that because it's meant to help, but it's almost harming now. that you will have to pay more money than you have required to. So I think that's a conversation we need to have with our federal delegation to actually push for a modification of the existing bill on that end to improve that part. There is also a conversation, the money part is that the state had the highest rainy day fund, but we are going to be going through that rainy day fund if we've already not finished it off because of the unprecedented situation that we are in. So I can tell you, state will have to heavily depend on the federal government. And as of right now, the support for the towns, the support for the state is not necessarily coming the way we would want it to. But these are conversations that are happening in the federal government's arena right now as we speak. I think there are bills that are being looked at to help out at this time. The DECD had a couple of funds for businesses, and they were oversubscribed right away because in this situation, everybody is in a similar boat as you are, and many people. There was one which was for $2 million, and they extended it to $5 million, and it's overextended already. From the application, it was for women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. That was a specific separate group. I'm just giving you an example, but there are other funds that they had, and it was like filled up immediately because the demand is so high. It's going to be a major challenge for us. I mean, even through the special session, I would just say that where's the money going to come from unless the federal government steps in? We thankfully, as a state, we had a rainy day fund, which was above and beyond that we have ever had in the history of the state. If it was a regular year, we would have been in trouble, but we have survived so far. But that's part of our challenge is going to be, how do we make that money appear going forward in the real sense? So just like your businesses are struggling, I can tell you the state is going to be struggling in the same way, and when look up to the federal government to help us responsibly.
Are there any other questions or issues? Rachel, I see your hand up.
I have a question about my ability to reopen. I'm not a gym. I work one-on-one with people, and I've been following guidelines and learning and kind of putting into place what I need to do. I'm doing some online work, but I'm not sure how to pick a category, which is why I'm in this meeting this morning, because it was the most like group, very small, boutique kinds of practices. I fall into health and wellness. I'm a licensed practitioner, but that's not what I'm working as now. I don't know that my clients will come offline and come back in to see me. It's more, I want to be prepared. I want to open if I can. I do want more ability to look at the data so we can do this really safely, but I don't know. And there are other people like me. Who are we and what do we fall under?
Well, would you be considered a professional service?
I am a professional service. I do a lot of counseling, but I'm not a psychotherapist. You know, my background's in women's health, and that's how I'm licensed. But it's not, my medical part of my practice is closed at this point. So I would not consider myself a medically necessary, you know, I have stayed closed this whole time. And I'm not chomping at the bit. I want to be part of the solution, but I also want to be open appropriately when I can be. And I don't know, I mean, I guess I could say I'm health and wellness, and but yes, it's a professional service.
I have an idea, and
Okay.
I would just say, because you fall into so many categories, I would just open when you're comfortable opening.
And follow all the guidelines that are out there. Yeah, it's a big help to look at the hair salons. I have learned so much and thought of ways that I can open and support other people, because I work with people who are small business owners too. So I think the more crossover we look at, we're going to come up with creative ideas, and we're going to know more in 2 months than we know now. You know, we've learned a lot in the last 6 weeks. So.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Can I share? I'd just like to say I was on a meeting before this came together, and David Lehman was speaking about, we were talking about the certification, and that is going to be done through DECD. It's going to be done online. So actually, you're going to have to comply with the checklist that they put together, and they're going to somehow issue some kind of a certification for you there. They're also saying that phase 2 and 3, 2 is going to be June, July. Phase 3 is August-ish. They're waiting. The plan right now is they're talking about waiting 4 to 6 weeks between each phase. And the reason is because they want the data. They just want to make sure that we don't relapse into a total back to where we were. So it's really hard for businesses to be patient. And the funding is tough. I feel your pain as the Chamber of Commerce. We don't qualify for any federal funding, 0. So we're in the same boat as you are. We're event driven and membership driven. We have no events and members aren't renewing because you're worried about your payroll. So, we're affected all across the board. The other thing I wanted to mention to you was.
Mary Ellen, can I just ask a question about one of the facts that you just gave?
Yep.
About the certification. Is there going to be a fee associated with getting that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know any of that. I don't believe so. And it's not online yet, is what I wanted to tell you. It's not online yet.
Thank you.
They also said there are going to be, in the next week or so, they're going to be releasing some more guidelines. So the guidelines are just in the beginning. They're just starting to formulate them.
Mike?
So related, so the guidelines for hair salons, and the link wasn't up when I went to do it, but exactly what Mary Ellen's talking about. It has certification, complete self-certification on DCD website to receive a Reopen Connecticut badge. There is no, from what I heard, there's no cost to it, but once complete, then you can choose to post that on site wherever you want, but you need to have that before you open. But again, I want to stress I like what Liz did in saying we have some things we did, share it with Jill to pass on. But again, if you go through the hair salon and barbershops, there's so much more than what you may be thinking. And you can, like, we're trying to scramble and we're sliding our date because health and safety is really critical for us. And we've got situation with babies at home and newborns. And so, we're going to do things cautiously, but there's so much in there, from health checks on employee initially returning to work to having documentation of logs for contact tracing in case there's a case that somebody has coronavirus that's been at your establishment. If you can go through that and document what you've done to support that I'm just feeling that could help these boutique gyms and health facilities. If you're showing that and then pass that on to Jill, to the team or whoever, that could go a long way in just carving out a different guideline that allows you to open maybe before the bigger establishments do. So again, I can't stress enough that, and I see Emily online. I'm sure she's dealing with a little different configuration than us. I think you might be are you a chair rental, Emily?
Sorry. Yes, I am.
Yeah. So I would love to hear from Emily too, but there's so much in the guidelines that I think could help every one of you if you get ahead of it.
I had a couple questions, Mike, you might be able to answer. Do you know for some of the guidelines if putting the partitions up you have to do, or only if you can remain 6 feet apart?
Yeah, so I was on a call. Jill can add to this. The rules, the guidelines, the rules say social distancing 6 feet apart. Somebody asked the question that could you use partitions, and the answer was yeah. If you had to, you could use partitions. We're choosing not to do that. We're actually going 12 feet apart or more because we're staggering to every other. We've talked about partitions, and immediately, again, lots of emotions and anxieties. The employees that have those anxieties, now they start having anxieties about, okay, now are we going to have to worry about people touching the partitions? And we've thought about like shower liners. I don't want that look in our salon, but it just adds potential risk of now how do you disinfect that? So although you might be able to use partitions, I would say be very, very careful about that as well. And Jill, you can add as well.
No, I think you said it, Mike. You can use the partitions if you choose to, if you can't get that 6 feet, but it's not required.
Okay.
We have a physical wall between partition walls between some of our chairs, and so two of the chairs are actually, if you measured them, they're 5 feet apart, not 6, but there's a wall. And we still have that stylist moving over one slot just because it makes us feel better.
Yeah.
Emily, did you have any other questions?
And I'm wondering if anybody, sorry, I was a little late to the call, so I don't know if you went over this, but if you have any details on the hair coverings that are now required for hairstylists.
Are we going to hazmat suits now?
That's what I think. I don't know.
I don't know if anyone has any answer to that.
I haven't seen that in the guidelines. The guidelines say face masks and shields. It used to say eye protection, but now it's face shields.
So
Jill,
I was on a call yesterday and they said that they added onto the guidelines saying that now we are required to wear hair coverings as well. So I was just kind of curious about that. What exactly is a hair covering and why we have to wear it while we're doing somebody's hair?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about hair coverings. Jeff, have you? I will check on that, but I haven't heard that.
Okay.
No, I don't recall the hair covering things, but if I have to imagine that if it's a hair covering, it's likely what you would find your elementary school cafeteria worker wearing.
Don't say that.
I have a follow-up though for this is for everybody's benefit. When they change the guidelines, if they like blow dryers are now allowed and they reissue, it's critical that there's a section that highlights the changes because we're marching forward to prepare, and then there's a change and they reissue a whole set of guidelines, and if it doesn't show us what the changes were, it just puts us back to square one and try to figure it all out again. So suggestion to the team, I'm not sure how they're handling that, but I saw an updated guideline come out. I thought it was, maybe it wasn't. One of our reps sent it to us. It looked exactly the same. I'm looking for a change in a word somewhere, and I don't have a clue what the changes are.
Yeah, we can make that suggestion to the governor's team to see if they can highlight exactly what those changes are each time.
And maybe they have. They may have missed it as well.
Jeff, I know you have to go in 10 minutes, so I just wanted one other question that we kind of talked about at the beginning of the call. Is there going to be any guidelines for gyms or personal trainers or anything about the outdoor, about the possibility of teaching outdoors before we're allowed to open the studios, and where we could possibly do that, you know, like if what the parks or what would state parks allow us, or any sort of guidelines that maybe could get us some business before our physical space could be entered into.
So I mean, and don't take my word as Bible, but I almost would think that if you are outside, you are, so long as you're keeping numbers under the set numbers for gatherings, that you would be able to do whatever you wanted to do outside.
Well, I guess maybe because I would want more than 5 people, because I would have 2 staff. I'd only be allowed to have 3 people attend. So I guess I'm asking maybe for more of a special permit or something where we could have a bigger crowd that's socially distanced outside so that we could actually become more economical.
Gotcha. All right, yeah, we can ask that question.
Okay.
The other thing that I have a question on, and I'd love to know, if there's opportunity for, our state reps to help influence town and landlords. My landlord has, to be quite honest, been very ruthless during this entire thing. He obviously falls under the mortgage protection program that's in place right now, but I'm still paying 100% of my rent and have been. And I'm not occupying the building, so it doesn't seem fair. Written in my lease specifically is that that once I'm issued a certificate of occupancy, the lease kicks in, right? And so I was issued a certificate of occupancy, but I then almost was like revoked, even though it was given by the state level. I do not have a certificate of occupancy right now to operate, right? We are not allowed to operate. Fitness studios, gyms, whatever category we fall in, are not allowed to operate. And I'm still expected to pay my rent. What, if any, thing are we doing, in this realm to help business owners with their operational expenses? Because mine have not gone down at all, right? And specific to rent and helping to influence landlords. And I'm also wondering if there's an opportunity as a town, if you own a business in the town of Glastonbury or Marlborough or any of these towns, and you are impacted as a business owner because your landlord isn't willing to work with you at all, like, do we really want those people owning businesses, owning buildings in our town? I mean, do we want to issue them mortgages to have buildings in our town? I know that's extreme, but it's like we're all playing nice and trying to live, and they're again getting mortgage forgiveness from the banks, and yet nothing changes on our end.
I would add to that, in my position, we weren't even able to open. We were slated to open when COVID hit, and so we're also getting rent, even though we haven't even got our certificate of occupancy, and we're also like not fully built out because our ceilings can't be inspected. I think they're having trouble getting the inspectors for the town over to just give us the okay to close our ceilings. So we're also like a little behind. We can't even finish and we can't get all the permitting to get the okay for when we're ready to go because we're just stuck.
And yet you're paying rent.
Eileen, shout out to my landlord then. I always feel like give praise when praise is due. So I'm sorry for all of you who are dealing with horrible landlords, but I'm going to give a shout out to my landlord. Stephen Roy is a wonderful landlord, and he's been working with all of us in the building. So just want to put a little positivity out there.
Okay. Eileen, could you speak to that?
Yeah, I don't think it's mortgage forgiveness. That's not the right term. They are getting a deferral. So it's not that they don't have to pay their mortgage, it's that they don't have to pay it maybe for the month of May. They are going to have to pay the mortgage and probably the interest on that mortgage, but the property owners are, I don't want to make this personal, but property owners are still having to pay their bills. They still have to pay to open the doors. They still, take Founders Plaza in East Hartford. I know you didn't mention East Hartford, but we are a member of the Glastonbury Marlborough Chamber as well. Founders Plaza still opens their building every day. They still have to turn on the lights. They still have to provide the heat. They still have to pay their operating costs. And if all of their tenants stop paying their rent, they're going to have a big problem. So it's not mortgage forgiveness. So those bills still have to be paid, and the property owners have to negotiate with their lenders. So the same way that you have to negotiate with your landlord, the property owners, if they're in trouble, have to negotiate with their lenders to see what they can do. The last thing anything a bank or a town wants is all of these properties to go into foreclosure, because the towns don't want them, and I don't think the banks want them. So there's going to have to be some give and take from both the tenants and the landlords and the lenders. So the good thing about our economy right now is that our lending institutions are not being affected the same way they were in 2008. So we don't have a mortgage crisis. We don't have a Wall Street crisis going on right now. So they are anticipating that there is going to be a bounce back, because that sector of our economy is still okay. Even the housing market is still operating pretty much okay. So the other comment that you made about towns not wanting people to own properties in their towns, I think is a common misconception by community and at large. Towns can't step into a private transaction and say, I don't want that person to buy this property. That doesn't exist in the real world, unless the town is going to step in and take the property themselves. But I will tell you that very rarely happens here in East Hartford. We did make a rare exception with the Showcase Cinemas because it was literally falling down. So that's not how the private market works, just because there's some sort of a disagreement or that's not how it works. You can't step into the private legal rights of somebody to own a property, and the town has no authority to. We have the authority to tax, and we have the authority to regulate land use, and that's really where our authority ends. We regulate by land use, so it's site plan review by the Planning and Zoning Commission and zoning regulations, health district regulations. That's how we legislate. We very rarely step in and kick people out or take over. So that's not how it works. The last thing I'm going to say, because it's 11 o'clock, is that the town of East Hartford did put together a recovery committee, and I have asked Mary Ellen to sit on that committee after these Zoom calls, which hopefully we'll get some East Hartford businesses on these calls too. I'm going to work on that with Mike that's on this call. But I am looking for input from businesses on the recovery committee. So the business subcommittee is going to include, because of the chamber, we are going to include Glastonbury and Marlborough in the recovery committee. So our recovery committee is mirroring the state recovery committee, and we are coming up with rules, regulations, suggestions on how our towns are going to recover. So the business subcommittee is going to overlap with our town lines. That's it.
All right. Anything else anyone has to say? Final comment? We're about an hour into our meeting here and about to end. Is there anything else? Questions, comments?
If I may, to wrap it up, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you especially to our elected officials, our senators, state representatives, 2 representatives from town of East Hartford, and all the great chamber members and people that maybe aren't even chamber members. We're just glad you're here. We're going to have 3 more of these. They may not be applicable to your particular sector, but we encourage you to invite your friends and colleagues to attend these. They're very, very helpful. Thank you very much, Paul, for facilitating.
Sure. Anything else? Mike, did you have something?
I was just going to tell Emily, if there's anything that I can help you with, just reach out to me. You can find me, just either find me on Mike Ski online and just message me.
Okay.
Or you can email me. It's mike@heretodayct.com.
Hold on, I'm writing it down.
Mike, I'm just going to put it in the chat if you want to reach out. If anybody wants to reach out, including the boutique gyms, and I don't want to call them gyms because you're not gyms. Boutique
Studios.
Fitness.
Studios.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh,
Everybody, thank you. I want to thank Jill and Jeff and Saud. Thank you very much for your participation. It was very important to have you here. Thanks a
I'll
lot.
just mention one thing before I leave as well. Look, we are in unprecedented times. Nobody has lived this experience for the past 102 years, and I have not yet met anybody who is alive who has experienced this. So there's no book that's out there to tell us how to do this. We actually have principles and understanding and priorities, and we are using some of those to make the best choices that we can. I can tell you from the medical end, this is a real disease. When you have people who have died in your arms and far more than has ever happened, you have to have a respect and in fear of the disease. And you don't want, I've had people in their 30s who have died, and I have people who in their 80s who have died. So there is a real threat on the other end as well. And I know, thankfully, most of us have not had a direct experience. So as a result, your fear, number one, is your finances. But it is not out of nowhere that this thing is coming out of. There's a real disease on the other end, so we have to have a protection. Now we know our children are at risk as well because there is a nasty disease that the children can get. So having the protection and finding that balance, keeping the economy going, personal and collective, is going to be the priority, and it can be done. And it needs to be done. And that is going to be our priority. We cannot just block the economy completely at the risk of the disease, because we understand the disease and we can actually navigate this in a smart fashion. So I just want to mention that to everybody. And I want to thank you. You're really doing some very critical time in a critical time of our history that we will look back and tell our great-grandchildren or grandchildren that this is what we had experienced, and we survived and thrived, and we were able to be responsible. And I want to be thankful for giving me the opportunity to be here and listen in, and I've taken notes and I will follow up on those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thank
you.
Bye.